Emily had driven for hours down winding back roads until the city lights vanished behind her. Ashwood was the kind of town that seemed forgotten by time, small, quiet, and with an uneasy stillness that made her grip the steering wheel a little tighter. Street lamps flickered intermittently, casting brief glows on cracked asphalt. She had heard the stories, whispered warnings about the Hollow house, the mansion perched on the edge of town, its silhouette barely visible in the mist. Most locals refused to speak of it, yet the fear in their eyes said more than words ever could. Her curiosity had driven her here, as a journalist used to digging up hidden truths. She couldn't resist the pull of something forbidden, something rumored to consume those who dared to enter. Her camera bag rested on the passenger seat, alongside a notebook and a flashlight. The closer she got, the heavier the fog became, wrapping around her car like damp, living fingers. Emily switched on the headlights, though they barely cut through the thick, gray haze. The air smelled faintly of decay, wet leaves, and something she couldn't quite name, a scent that prickled at the back of her throat. She parked at the end of a narrow, overgrown path and stepped out. The gravel crunched under her boots, echoing unnaturally in the empty night. The Hollow house loomed ahead, its windows dark and boarded, its roof sagging as if bowed under the weight of years. Ivy crept along the stone walls, and the wind whispered through broken shutters, creating a sound like voices murmuring just beyond hearing. Her skin prickled. She had felt fear before, of course, but this was different, heavier, deeper, as if the town itself were warning her to turn back. Emily's flashlight cut a narrow path through the fog. Each step forward felt deliberate, measured, as though the house were counting her movements. She noted the garden first, twisted, dead plants, skeletal remains of flowers that had long surrendered to neglect. A rusted swing set creaked in the wind, moving without reason. The air seemed to press against her chest. She took a deep breath and tried to ignore the sensation, reminding herself that fear was part of the story, part of the allure. The front door stood tall, ancient, with warped panels and rusted hinges. As she reached out, it groaned like a warning. Emily hesitated, then pushed it open. The smell hit her immediately, a mixture of wet wood, dust, and something far fouler, something she couldn't identify. Her flashlight's beam jittered across peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and scattered remnants of a life long gone. A rocking chair moved slightly as if nudged by an invisible hand, and a faint draft carried a sound that made her freeze, a whisper, soft and barely audible. "Leave." Emily's pulse quickened, but she forced herself forward, telling herself it was just the wine door, perhaps her imagination. She stepped carefully, avoiding splintered floorboards, each creak magnifying the oppressive silence. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally along the walls, moving in ways that didn't match her flashlight's beam. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors hung crookedly, their painted eyes unnervingly lifelike, following her as she moved deeper into the mansion. The grand staircase rose before her, its banister cracked and splintered. Emily hesitated halfway, listening. There it was again, a whisper, faint but insistent, coming from the upper floor. She couldn't make out the words this time, only the sense of being watched. Her hands shook as she gripped the banister. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, yet curiosity held her in place. She wanted to know who or what had made the house so alive with unseen presence. She climbed slowly, step by step, each groan of the stairs sounding like a scream. When she reached the landing, the hall stretched before her, lined with doors she knew weren't all there when she had entered. The house had shifted, as if it were breathing, rearranging itself to trap her inside. Emily's flashlight flickered, casting quick flashes of darkness and revealing brief glimpses of furniture. That wasn't where it had been before. A sudden chill wrapped around her neck like icy fingers. The whispering returned, louder, more insistent, echoing in the hall. You shouldn't be here. Panic threatened to overtake her, but she pushed forward, her voice barely a whisper. Hello? Is anyone there? Only silence answered. The shadows seemed to ripple in response, forming shapes that were almost human, almost alive. Her breath came fast, clouding in the cold air. Every instinct told her to run, yet the house seemed to stretch farther with every step. Corridors lengthening impossibly, doors opening to rooms she had never seen. Emily stopped at the door of what looked like a study. The floor was covered in dust, books scattered across a cracked desk. As she stepped inside, her foot caught on something small, leather-bound journal lying half-buried in debris. She picked it up, the pages brittle and smelling of mold. The writing was cramped, desperate. She couldn't read much before a sudden movement in the corner of the room made her spin around. A shadow moved at the top of the staircase. Tall, shapeless, yet undeniably present. It didn't step closer, but its presence pressed on her mind, tugging at her thoughts, feeding on the fear that had built since her arrival. Emily felt rooted to the spot, every muscle frozen. Her flashlight flickered violently, then went out completely, plunging her into darkness. The whispering escalated into multiple voices, overlapping, incoherent yet threatening. In a blind panic, Emily stumbled backward, her hands scraping against the wall. The floor beneath her shifted, boards cracking, giving way. She tumbled down, landing hard in a cellar below. Darkness swallowed her entirely. She could barely see, only the faint outline of stone walls glistening with dampness. Her heart pounded as the oppressive feeling of being watched intensified. The cellar felt alive, pulsating, breathing around her. Every sound she made echoed like a scream in a cavernous tomb. Emily fumbled for her flashlight, finally finding it and flicking it on. The beam illuminated a scene that made her stomach churn. Shadows clung to the walls, elongated and writhing. Figures pressed against the corners, faces pale, eyes hollow, mouths frozen in silent screams. Emily realized with a jolt that these were the missing people who had vanished. After entering the Hollow house, now trapped between life and death, her breath caught in her throat as she backed toward a far wall, realizing she had crossed into a place where fear itself had formed, and the house had claimed her attention, her presence, perhaps even her soul. The whispers began again, surrounding her in a suffocating chorus. She tried to scream, but only a breathless whisper escaped. The shadows shifted, advancing without moving, reaching for her mind, her essence. Emily felt a pull, a tug that went beyond her body, deeper into her consciousness. The Hollow house was alive, and it was aware. The night stretched endlessly, and the fog outside pressed against the cellar walls. Hiding Ashwood in a suffocating silence, Emily's adventure had just begun. The house had revealed a glimpse of its horrors, and she was trapped in its beginning, the mist outside sealing her fate. She knew, deep down, that whatever she would find next could change everything or end everything. Emily's lungs burned as she struggled to catch her breath, the shadows pressing closer, moving with a will of their own. The cellar's cold stone walls seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting as if the house itself were breathing. She lifted her flashlight again, shaking in her hands, trying to find any way out. But the room was alive with forms' faces pressed against the walls, hollow eyes blinking slowly in the flickering beam. They weren't just trapped, they were feeding off her fear, and she realized with a sinking heart that she had become prey in a place that thrived on terror. The whispers began again, louder now, overlapping in a discordant chorus that clawed at her mind. You belong here. You cannot leave. Emily stumbled backward, almost falling over a pile of broken furniture. Each shadow seemed to stretch toward her, tendrils of darkness brushing her arms and legs. She screamed, a raw, desperate sound that echoed through the cellar, but it felt swallowed by the house. Her voice, her presence, had no power here. She moved cautiously toward a corner, noticing a faint glow emanating from beneath a wooden trapdoor. Trembling, she knelt and pushed it open. A narrow staircase descended further into darkness, and she had no choice but to follow. The steps creaked and moaned under her weight, each one amplifying the sensation of falling into something ancient, something alive. At the bottom, she found a small chamber. Walls lined with old furniture draped in rotting sheets and piles of forgotten belongings. In the center sat a desk, and atop it lay a diary, much older and dustier than the one she had found earlier. Emily's hands shook as she opened the diary. The pages were filled with cramped, frantic writing in black ink. It belonged to Margaret Hollow, the original owner of the mansion, whose name had haunted the town for decades. The entries detailed voices that whispered from walls, shadows that moved without logic, and a curse that had slowly consumed her family. The last pages were smeared with dark stains that could only have been blood. Margaret wrote of the house as if it were sentient, feeding on the fear and souls of anyone who dared to enter. The final line made Emily's stomach twist. They never leave. They hunger. And now, I am part of them. The chamber seemed to grow colder as she read. Shadows pooled at the edges of the room, darker than the darkness itself. Figures began to emerge from the walls, silent and twisted, their expressions locked in eternal terror. Emily realized she wasn't just in a haunted house, she was inside a predator. A living entity that consumed fear and trapped the living within its walls. The air was thick, almost viscous, pressing against her chest and making her gasp. A sound like 1,000 fingernails scraping across wood echoed through the room, and Emily spun around. The shadows surged forward, forming shapes that resembled people she might have known, friends. Neighbors, strangers, yet their faces were distorted, their eyes empty pits of endless horror. They reached for her, yet she couldn't see them fully, as if the house refused to reveal all at once. Each touch of their intangible fingers sent icy shocks through her body. Panic clawed at her mind, but she forced herself to focus. Knowing that fear would only give the house more power, her flashlight flickered, revealing a narrow passage behind the desk. Emily scrambled toward it, stumbling over debris, the whispers growing louder, forming words she could almost understand. "You are ours, forever." She entered the passage, the walls pressing inward, the ceiling descending in a slow, suffocating motion. The darkness was no longer passive. It moved with intent, coiling around her, and she felt herself being pulled downward, deeper into the house's heart. The passage opened into a vast hall, grand yet decayed. The floorboards were slick with water and dust, and the chandeliers overhead swayed even though no breeze moved. At the far end, a massive fireplace burned with an unnatural flame, black and cold, yet casting long, twisting shadows that seemed to move independently. And there, sitting in an armchair by the hearth, was a figure, Margaret Hollow herself, or at least what remained. Her eyes were voids, black and empty, her skin as pale as ash. She did not move, yet Emily felt her gaze pierce through every layer of her being. "You shouldn't have come," a voice hissed, echoing through the hall. Emily's flashlight went out again, plunging her into a darkness so complete it felt alive. The shadows from the walls surged toward her, and she realized that escaping might be impossible. The house didn't just trap you physically. It trapped your mind, your very essence. Margaret's presence seemed to reach inside her, pulling memories, twisting thoughts, feeding on the terror that coursed through her veins. Emily turned and ran, her footsteps echoing unnaturally in the hall. Doors opened and closed around her. Hallways stretched and twisted, creating a labyrinth that refused logic. The whispers followed, now voices of countless trapped souls, their murmurs forming a single horrifying chorus. "You are one of us. "You belong." She felt icy hands wrap around her ankles, pulling her to the floor. She screamed and kicked, clawing her way to the stairs leading upward, hoping for any exit, any way to the outside world. When she reached the top, she found herself in a long corridor lined with mirrors. Her reflection stared back, but it was Wrong Eyes hollow, skin pale, mouth twisted in a scream. Each mirror reflected not just her face, but a glimpse of every person who had vanished before her. Emily stumbled past them, terrified of becoming another trapped soul, another whisper in the mist. At the far end of the corridor, a faint light beckoned. She ran toward it, nearly collapsing with exhaustion and terror. The light grew brighter, revealing a single door. Emily pushed it open and found herself on the mansion's roof, fog swirling around her like living smoke. She could see the town of Ashwood below, silent and unaware, the street lamps flickering. Relief surged through her. Maybe she had found the way out. But the house wasn't finished with her. The shadows erupted from the roof, tendrils wrapping around her legs, dragging her back toward the chimney. She screamed, clawing at the mist, but the force was relentless. From below, the entire mansion seemed to breathe, walls bending, windows stretching, the house alive and hungry. Emily's flashlight flickered one last time, illuminating the horror etched across her own face as she was pulled into the darkness. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, a chorus of the lost and the damned. "You are ours, forever." And then, silence. Ashwood remained quiet. The fog rolled in thick layers, hiding the hollow house from view, as if it had never been disturbed. Locals would tell.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.